Christmas is just around the corner, so fill your stocking or someone else's with some good stuff. Premium quality gaming kit from SteelSeries. They've launched a huge range of award-winning products this year, so it's a great time to refresh your setup or someone else's. Get 12% off all purchases using offer code SKILLUP at SteelSeries.com. Click below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Marvel's Midnight Suns is a fascinating video game because it's an inversion of a scenario that often occurs in narrative-led, story-driven RPGs. The one where the story and the characters are really cool, but the gameplay is middling to bad. Mass Effect 1 comes to mind. I mean, you're gonna tell me you played Mass Effect 1 for its glorious combat? Come on now, even back then it was tolerable at best. You just kind of did some stuff in corridors for a bit so you could reach the next cutscene. But those cutscenes, oh my god, the writing, the world building, the lore, the characters, you lived for that shit. You didn't care that the gameplay was arse because you were there for the story. It's very rare that a game sees an inversion of this scenario. A narrative-led RPG with 40 plus hours of cutscenes and recorded dialogue where almost all of it is terrible. But the gameplay side of things is awesome, although there are some problems with that as well. Because yeah, I'm going to tell you what I told you in my preview, which is that I'm all in on the gameplay side of this game. I spent 60 hours with it, I finished it, and I enjoyed it because the tactical turn-based deck builder combat here is excellent. This is not XCOM, it's entirely new, and it stretches very different strategic and tactical muscles, but I found it just as deep, just as rewarding, and just as replayable. The key to the success of Midnight Suns' gameplay is that Firaxis has delivered authentic renditions of these characters as they exist on the battlefield. Even though I'm playing cards, I still feel like I'm controlling a character that is unmistakably Wolverine. His rage, his frenzy, his ferocity, his resilience, all of it is perfectly captured in a handful of cards, and combining those cards in different ways allows me to make Wolverine my own, perhaps focusing more on AoE attacks, or single target damage, or taunting the enemy, or resilience and regeneration, etc. Even though I may take pleasure in finessing my own version of Wolverine, the real credit goes to Firaxis, who have managed to recreate this character so faithfully as he exists in combat. The same cannot be said for the way Firaxis have brought these characters to life on the other side of the game. If the principal success of the gameplay lies in a faithful recreation of these characters, then the principal failure of the narrative side of this game is that it fails categorically, catastrophically, to render a version of these heroes that feels at all authentic or interesting or anything other than insufferable. All of these heroes are so lifeless, so one-dimensional. The most important tenets of their personalities have been completely erased to make room for RPG social system banter. They are written with one voice and they all have the emotional intelligence of high schoolers. I'm going to expand on this a lot later, but this is actually the worst rendition of these heroes I've ever encountered. It really is that bad. But, like I said, I still enjoyed this game because when I made peace with just how bad the narrative side of the equation was, I was able to focus on the combat, and that was more than enough for me to have a great time and to be keen for more. Honestly, I'd play the DLC for this game. I genuinely would. And I think Marvel's Midnight Suns is a great example of the fact you can still really enjoy a game if large parts of it suck, because I really did enjoy this game. But yeah, a large part of it really sucks. Touch on technical performance quickly. I tested Marvel's Midnight Suns on 3 PCs, an RTX 4090 with a Ryzen 9 5950X, an RTX 2080 Ti with a Ryzen 7 3700X, and a Steam Deck. So, Steam Deck, it's not actually officially supported because the Steam Deck is below the recommended specs. However, it actually runs pretty well on Steam Deck. Running it on low settings, it definitely works. It works because it's a turn-based game where you can put up with a lower frame rate without the experience suffering too much. I don't know if it'll ever get deck verified given the recommended specs threshold, so I wouldn't purchase this if the Steam Deck is your only PC, but if you're grabbing it to play on a desktop or a laptop, then yeah, you're also going to be able to play it on deck, though mind you, cloud saves do not sync yet, so you're going to need to have a separate file on deck. On the 2080 Ti, this machine is actually plugged into my LG CX TV, and I encountered an issue where I was unable to get it running above 720p. I actually spoke to 2K about this and they confirmed that it is a known issue, and they say that it will be fixed for launch, but I can't confirm that obviously. So yeah, if you are using your PC with a TV, then definitely hold off on grabbing this until you can be certain that this resolution issue is fixed, because the game looks terrible at 720p on a big ass TV. That brings me to the RTX 4090 machine, which is where I was forced to do the majority of my playthrough, since I usually prefer to review stuff on that 2080 Ti machine. Unfortunately, even with a $1,600 GPU, and without the game even looking that good, Midnight Suns does not run well. At 4K max settings, the base frame rate is pretty good at around 100 to 120 frames. The issue is that so often when you play out a card and the animation rolls, the game will start seizing up with all these micro stutters. This happens for every hero in every location and on any ability. It's just kind of random. Sometimes it's fine, other times it just chugs down to like 10 FPS for a few seconds before springing back to life. It's genuinely quite annoying, and I worry how lower end hardware will deal with this. Things are kind of worse back at the Abbey, funnily enough, which is the home base where you and all the heroes hang out. You walk around there in third person, and I really couldn't get it running at much above 60 FPS on an RTX 4090. This is all the more surprising because Marvel's Midnight Suns is not a good looking game, like not at all. It's got a very simple visual style, character models are very low detail, the maps you're playing on are very small and they don't have a lot of geometry. There's not much going on visually, and yet the game struggles to maintain stability and struggles to deliver a high frame rate when in the Abbey. The good news is that none of this is terminal. As I mentioned earlier, this is a turn-based tactics game, so fluidity of motion isn't critical to the experience. The stutters are annoying. The poor Abbey performance is annoying, but it's not a deal breaker, at least for me. Further, I think I had 2 crashes in 60 hours and only 1 gameplay related bug. I think this is a fairly bug-free product, but the technical performance is still quite shaky, so if you're particular about that, then I'd recommend holding off until some patches have rolled through. Marvel's Midnight Suns is not XCOM with Marvel heroes. I thought it was going to be that, and I was wrong, and to be honest, I'm kind of happy that I was wrong, because I've played a lot of XCOM, and it's nice to experience something new, and I really believe that Firaxis have done a superb job building out this new combat model. So the foundation here are the heroes. You bring 3 into each battle. Story missions usually force you to bring 1 or 2 specific heroes, but for the side missions, you can bring whoever you want. Each hero brings 8 cards into battle representing their abilities, and those are shuffled into your hand at the start of every turn. You can play out 3 cards, but there are ways to play out many more than that, and you can also redraw a few cards each turn if you aren't happy with your hand. You play your hand until you have either no cards or no plays left, and then you hand over to the enemy for their turn. Repeat until the objective is complete. The objective of each mission isn't just to kill everything, by the way. Often it's a really clever objective, like rescuing civilians who are pinned under rubble, and you get a card in your hand allowing you to do that, but you need to make sure you use it at the right moment. There are missions that involve hacking security terminals, protecting a vital piece of technology, destroying enemy tech, and as you'd expect, big showdowns with bosses possessed by the big baddie, Lilith. So already, missions have a fair amount of variety in them, and that's before you get to the maps. So in Midnight Suns, your cards are sort of only one piece of the combat puzzle. The other piece is environment design. Each map is littered with shovable objects, platforms you can leap up from, suspended cargo you can drop in enemies' heads, exploding barrels, ledges you can knock enemies off, etc. It's all stuff that you can turn against your foe, because a huge number of your abilities have knockback effects. So a big part of combat is looking to combine the cards in your hand with the various environmental elements at your disposal. This works brilliantly, and with some lateral thinking, you can absolutely dumpster the enemy board if your hand and the environmental elements line up in just the right way. Having said that, map design is a weakness. It's only ever very small, entirely flat arenas with no obstructions and no verticality whatsoever. This is a far cry from XCOM, where its levels were rich with geometry that needed to be either overcome or taken advantage of. Lines of sight, great spans of distance and verticality were all things you had to hold in your mind as you played, and they deepened the strategic framework while also making levels feel distinct. Levels here do not feel remotely distinct, and I suspect that the game's excellent combat would have been even better had level design played a larger role. Something similar could be said of boss enemies. This is a 60-hour game, and in that time, I think I encountered a total of 5 bosses. that's pretty low, but it gets even worse when you learn that you have to fight these same bosses multiple times, and they're always the same when you do that, and each time you fight them, you need to down them multiple times to defeat them. Firaxis couldn't figure out a way to make boss encounters more interesting than kill them 3 times, which is a shame given how much imagination and ingenuity they've shown in other parts of the combat framework. The last challenge that you might encounter when it comes to combat is general pacing, not in the combat rhythm per se, but in the pace at which new things are added to the game. It was at around the 25-hour mark that I started to get some new enemy types, and then I don't think I got any more until about the 50-hour mark, and then I wrapped up at 60. Given how skint this game is with enemy and boss variety, 60 hours to play through it is just too long. You could have condensed this into a more taut, lean 30 to 40-hour package, and the game would have been better for it. So those are all my complaints out of the way, and this is the perfect time for me to say, I really, really love this combat. I did. The cards are the star of the show. They truly capture the essence of each of these heroes, giving them so much distinct identity on the battlefield and opening up so many tactical options, either on their own or in combination with other cards, or in combination with the various environmental elements present on the map. Take Captain Marvel, for example. She is an absolute powerhouse to the point where she's kind of the strongest character in the game, and rightly so if you think about it. You can build her for damage and knockbacks, but she thrives as a tank, taunting enemies, stacking block, and going binary if you play out enough of her cards. Spidey is another great example. He excels at crowd control, being able to bind targets or blind them with his web fluid. He's also big into environmental damage, having heaps of ways to fling enemies into each other or off ledges, just as Spider-Man does in the movies and comics and cartoons and whatever else. I'm on. Nico is interesting. She's a magic wielder, and she's all about randomness, with each of her abilities having a chance of doing something different based on how your cards are drawn. Sometimes she's kind of ineffective, but if the stars line up, she is devastating, able to debuff enemies, buff allies, and deal huge amounts of single target damage. When I did my preview, I talked about the differences between this and XCOM, and I commented that Midnight Suns is more immediate, requiring on-the-fly decision-making, whereas XCOM provides a more delayed payoff. More than a few people said, well, that's the difference between strategy and tactics. And, well, yeah, that's sort of true, but I don't think we should sell short the strategic nature of this game. The deck building that you do, which cards you put into your deck, which cards to level up, which modifiers to apply to those cards, and which heroes to combine with each other, these are all strategic decisions, and there's so much flex within everything that I've listed there that I don't think most people will feel as though Midnight Suns is not a strategic game. It's not just a straight roll of the dice or just playing whatever cards you're randomly drawn. There's a lot of pre-work that goes into being able to execute your intended strategy on the battlefield, and that pre-work all happens back at the Abbey. Marvel's Midnight Suns is 2 games. The first happens on the battlefield, which is what I just talked about. The other game happens back at Midnight Suns HQ, aka the Abbey. It's here where heroes will hang out between missions, spending time with you while preparing for their next fight. We'll talk about the social stuff soon, but let's focus on the progression stuff for now, because it's actually pretty good. Abbey life is divided into days. Each day you rise from your slumber, and there are a list of tasks you should then knock over. Your first stop is almost always the Forge, where you'll be conducting research tasks to unlock new upgrades at the Abbey, which translate into new combat abilities or new progression pathways. It's also here that you'll be analyzing gamma coils, which are essentially like card packs, each of which contain random cards for the heroes that were on the field during the most recent combat mission. So if you want to get cards for Ghostwire, you'll bring him along to a main or a side mission, and the next day you'll get some new cards for him. That's how it works. Your next stop might be the Yard. It's here where you can train with a hero of your choice, increasing their stats for the next mission and deepening your relationship to them. You can also combine any duplicate cards you've collected, allowing you to make them more powerful. Later on, you'll start unlocking modifiers for your cards, so 2 identical cards can have a wildly different secondary effect, and this has huge ramifications on how diverse and distinct your deck building can become. It really does work super well. After that's done, you might head over to the command center, where you can run hero ops, sending heroes out for missions without you to collect currencies and upgrades, and then it's on to the mirror table, where you can select a mission. There are always a bunch to choose from, and each one awards different stuff. If you need a certain type of currency, you can get it by choosing the right mission type. If you want to level up a hero or unlock some new cards for them in preparation for the next main mission, just bring them along for a few of these missions to get them ready for the big show. All of this coalesces into a pretty good daily rhythm. As you unlock new base upgrades and grind currencies, it does feel as though you're working towards something. You rise with enthusiasm, excited to see what the day will bring, what cards are going to unlock, which upgrades will come online, which new missions will appear on the board. It's a nice flow, and I definitely found myself more than happy to just sink into it. But when the mission ends and the sun sets, it's time to hang out with these heroes, get to know them, and do stuff with them, and it's there that things turn to shit.
I will try skiing if you do not mind teaching me.
That's the spirit.
What are we doing here, Magic?
We're unwinding together.
Alright, we've spoken about the gameplay, and I would like you to keep all of that gushing praise in mind, and the fact that I am recommending this game, and the fact that I dropped 60 hours into this thing and did so uncomplainingly because I enjoyed it. I really did. I ask you to keep all that in mind because I have absolutely nothing good to say about the non-gameplay parts of this game. I think they are a train wreck, and it is a miracle that this game survives, given how leveraged it is into this generic, padded out, forgettable storyline populated with the worst rendition of these heroes that I have ever seen. And I know that's a big call, right? Because we all go back with Marvel heroes. I used to collect the comics back in the 90s. I used to watch the X-Men cartoon on Cheese TV. Shout out to the Aussies in the crowd. The X-Men movie was in 2000. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was in 2002. Those movies were the precursors to the MCU, which began in 2008 with Iron Man. And to this day, the MCU continues to be the largest force in popular culture, with dozens of movies, TV shows, and whatever blanketing the airways. There were also video games along the way, more back in the day, but fewer more recently. Spider-Man PS4 is a standout, of course. The Avengers, not a great live service game, but a pretty decent single-player game if you just play through the campaign and put it down. Guardians of the Galaxy, absolute highlight, one of the best hero stories across any medium, I'd say, writing that absolutely blew the doors off the joint with strong performances and technical wizardry to match. So we know all of these characters, and we have seen them all rendered in various ways dozens of times over dozens of years, but I really do believe that Marvel's Midnight Suns Marvel heroes are the worst renditions ever. For example, here is Blade, badass vampire hunter, on the battlefield. Now here is Blade back at base.
You've proven you can handle yourself with a sword, Hunter, but a warrior's greatest weapon is their mind. Yoga requires discipline, balance, and control.
Yes, Blade is into yoga, and he has thoughts on it. He enjoys a bit of casual yoga in the sun with his bromeo when he's a little too tightly wound after slaying vampires. You know what else Blade is into? Books. How do I know that? Because he runs the book club. Every few nights he sends me a text message and invites me to a cordoned off section of the library so we can discuss whatever it is that we've chosen to read together. Wolverine's in the book club too, by the way. In one meeting, we spend like 5 minutes talking about Wolverine's favorite book, which doesn't even fucking exist, and almost every major plot point in this make-believe book is agonizingly recounted. What is the point of all this dialogue, you ask? I can assure you, absolutely nothing. Anyway, back to Blade. You want to know why he's convened the book club? It's because he has a crush on Captain Marvel, but he doesn't have the balls to make a move, so he's using book club as an excuse to get close to her. Again, I remind you that I'm not making any of this up. Complicating Blade's romantic machinations is none other than Captain America. Oh no, he's not cutting Blade's grass, which would actually be kind of funny to watch, and I'd be interested in that. Instead, Captain America mistook a conversation about books between Blade and Captain Marvel as an invitation to a book club, and so now he's in the mix even though Blade doesn't want him there. But again, Blade doesn't have the balls to tell Steve to fuck off, and so Steve is there gumming up the works, and I get an invite to book club because I balance it out, according to Blade. It gets better. At one point, Steve approaches me and he's like, I think Blade is using book club as an excuse to be my friend. And Steve wants Blade to know that he wants to be friends with Blade too, but he doesn't know how to tell him that. So Captain America, Steve Rogers, the leader of the Avengers, asks for my advice on how he should approach Blade so that they can agree to become friends.
It's about Blade. I get the feeling that all of Book Club is just his roundabout way of getting to be friends with me.
I wish I could tell you the story I just relayed to you was the exception to the rule, but it's not. This is what this entire side of this game is like. Every line of dialogue and every scenario is so vapid, so contrived, and so stupid that the Abbey is essentially just a schoolyard. And at one point, Peter Parker actually says this.
Nobody told me becoming a superhero would be like high school all over again.
This is what I mean when I say that this is the worst rendition of these heroes I've ever seen. And to really break it down, because I want to go all in on this, I think this failure exists at 3 levels. Number 1, there is no remix of the core conceit or backstories of any of these characters, despite the fact that we have been immersed in them for the better part of 2 decades. Like Spider-Man, for example. He joins your party, and when he does so, there's one of those introductory dialogue sequences where you get to ask him questions. The Hunter doesn't know Spider-Man, so he asks him, how did you become Spider-Man? And Peter just recounts the same story as forever. You know, field trip, Mary Jane, red anti-spin, got powers that aren't me. We've heard it so many times. Why not try something a little bit different? Put a spin on it. Something, anything. It's the same for every single one of these characters. Every one of them has the exact same backstory you'd be familiar with if you've watched any movies or TV shows or cartoons. It's the same. And their powers are the same. And they're just the same. The same they've always been dozens of times before, only now worse. They're worse because of the second way this whole thing falls apart, which is that even though their backgrounds and conceits remain the same, the personalities of these heroes has been completely scooped out and replaced with utter faff. Blade is the best example, utterly neutered as a character. Like, you thought Blade was badass? Wait until you... Look, I've already talked about this Blade. How about Wolverine? He's a really nice guy, by the way. Just a nice person. I went bird watching him with him one time. He loved that. He's more than happy to talk about his past, and I'll even thank you for inquiring.
It's been a pleasure. If you have more questions, you know where to find me.
Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, one of the most powerful entities in all of the Marvel Universe. She's little more than a fawning schoolgirl here who just can't get over how good you are at poker and making friends and leading people and everything, really. You're so impressive, says the woman who's defeated entire alien empires on her own, and she just can't stop talking about how talented you are.
There you go again, being all unexpectedly humble and generous.
Ghost Rider. Oh man, you're excited to see this fiery demon from hell? Meet Robbie Reyes, who spends the entire game doubting himself and like, oh, everyone is so powerful and cool. Does he really deserve a spot on a team of such badasses? Constantly asks the man with a flaming skull for a head. I could go on and on and on, but I won't. And some of you at this point are going to be like, well, you just said you wanted a different take on these characters, but then you complain when you get it. My dude, listen, just because I want a fresh take doesn't mean I want to be doing Downward Dog with Blade or watching for Waterfowl with Wolverine. There are certain lines you don't cross, and Marvel's Midnight Suns commits the cardinal sin of taking some of the most badass characters in the MCU and turning them all into fucking pussies. So there's a third reason why all of this is so bad, and I think it's the most explanatory reason. It's that the characters' personalities, interests, and dialogue options do not exist to deliver a faithful or interesting take on these characters. They exist to power a relationship system full of dialogue checks, scripted hangout events, and friendship levels. This is essentially a really badly written JRPG or BioWare game where the gameplay goal of interacting with your teammates is to get them to like you more, so that you can unlock new upgrades for them. The problem is that no effort has gone into making this dialogue or these hangout scenarios authentic to these characters. It's generic exchanges where Wolverine is like, oh, you're really growing on me. And Magic's like, I never trust people, but I'm starting to trust you. Trust me, her Russian accent's a little better than mine. Instead of hangouts tailored for each hero, like bar fighting with Wolverine, or crime fighting in New York City with Spidey, or portal hopping through Limbo with Magic, it's just a generic list of activities that any character model can be dropped into. Want to go stargazing tonight? Sure, Carol's up for that, so is Tony Stark, so is Nico, so is whoever. That's how you get bird watching with Wolverine, or reading by the fire with Captain America. The final nail in the coffin is just how fucking boring all of this is. I told you I spent 60 hours with this game. At least 30 hours of that was doing this shit. It's so slow every time, every conversation happens at a snail's pace, and absolutely nothing of value or interest is said at any point. Whether it's the main storyline or the side quests or the hangouts or the friendship level up cutscenes, it's just such milquetoast faff, never daring to be truly funny or truly edgy or truly emotive or anything. It expertly walks this fine line of never saying anything. I cannot recall a game I've ever played where so many words have been expelled over so many hours and yet absolutely nothing of value was said. This obviously begs the question, how could you recommend this title if such a massive portion of it is bad? That's a fair question. To be honest, I suspect a lot of people are just not going to be able to get past the story side of the game. They may really enjoy the gameplay side of the equation, but the story side is such an integral part of this that it's hard to look past it or to endure much of it. This is going to sound a little cynical, but I really recommend doing what I did at around the 50-hour mark. I just started skipping most of the dialogue. That last 10 hours was so much more enjoyable because I didn't have to listen to these vacant NPCs drone on, and I got to get back to the gameplay side of things faster. And that was great for me because, as I said, I love the gameplay. I really did. Yes, complaints about map design are fair. I think they could have been more interesting. Yes, the pacing of unlocks and new enemies is too slow, and yes, there are too few bosses with too many repeated encounters, but despite all of this, 60 hours deep, I was still having a great time. The rendition of these characters at the Abbey was an unmitigated failure, but the rendition of these heroes on the battlefield was a triumphant success. I was blown away by how well Firaxis managed to deliver an authentic Wolverine-feeling character in a turn-based strategy card game. The ferocity of his moveset as distinct from the targeted precision of Blade, or the environmental manipulation of Spider-Man, or the aggro-grabbing tankiness of Cap. I loved these characters. I loved how faithfully they delivered on the promise of those heroes, and I loved to see how I could combine them in different ways in each encounter to dig myself out of seemingly impossible situations. As I said at the start, some of our favorite games can have some fairly glaring flaws. Skyrim is buggy as all hell, but we still love it. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet run like shit, but Pokemon fans are going nuts for them. Destiny's storytelling was a train wreck for like 6 years before it finally got good, and I know a lot of people still don't like it, but we're not going to go there. Hell, most live service games have their fair share of bullshit built in when you think about it. Point is, a game doesn't have to be fantastic in all of its components to be enjoyable, and for me, I found enough fun in the combat to walk away from this experience happy and glad that I played through it, and that's why I do recommend half of Midnight Suns, but only the good half. Alright, so Christmas is just a few short weeks away and people are asking, hey man, what do you want? And you're like, I don't know. Or maybe you're racking your brains thinking of something to buy for your gamer brother, or your gamer girlfriend, or even your gamer mum. That's right, mums play games too, much respect to them. Whoever it may be, treat yourself or the special gamer in your life with the best kit money can buy, SteelSeries. SteelSeries products are industry leading. You don't have to take my word for it. Go and look up reviews and you will see that in every category, from mice to keyboards to headsets and beyond, SteelSeries stuff racks up awards left, right, and center. With a mix of functionality, quality, comfort, and reliability, SteelSeries has cemented an enviable reputation, and I'm very proud to have them as a channel partner. This has been a huge year for them, with new product launches galore and a refresh of almost all of their major offerings. Take headsets. The Nova Pro Wireless is astoundingly good. It's the headset I use, and I can't imagine using anything else. But there's other variants in the mix as well, such as the Nova 7, offering an AI-supported noise-canceling microphone and Bluetooth integration so you can take calls while you're playing. But what about mice? Right now, I'm rocking the Aerox Wireless. So light, so comfortable, fantastic battery life, and pinpoint precision. How about keyboards? This year, SteelSeries refreshed their range, including the Apex Pro TKL, the fastest keyboard ever built with their all-new Omni Pro 2.0 adjustable switch technology, awarded Best Gaming Keyboard by Wired Magazine. That is the keyboard that I use, and I love it. Whatever gaming kit you need, SteelSeries make it, and they make the best version of it, so you can buy with confidence from them, and you can buy at a discount because SteelSeries have partnered with the channel to provide you a no questions asked 12% discount on any purchase from SteelSeries.com when you use offer code SkillUp at checkout. Any item at all, 12% off when you use offer code SkillUp at SteelSeries.com. Perfect time for Christmas, but do get in quick as stock may sell out during the busy gifting season. Thank you SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.